Generally speaking, what does the chatter that goes on in the locker room, what does it consist of?
Um, it's anything, what's going on in sports, what's going on in the world. Talk about girls, talk about school. There's not really one specific thing that they talk about, or we talk about.
Well, I think most boys would be amazed at the stuff that girls talk about in the locker room. It's probably a lot more similar to like a boys' locker room than most boys would probably think. There's like no filters with what anybody says, and like you hear all the details about everybody's life, and like a lot more than I think most boys would think that the girls talk about it, the way the girls talk in the locker room. Like my senior year, I was the captain of my boys team, and like I think that it would have been weird like if I wasn't in the locker room sometimes with like talking about stuff. Yeah.
So locker room talk didn't change at all with you. It was the locker room talk. You're just part of the locker room.
Yeah. It was kind of weird because I mean like none of the boys really had filters, and like when my brother was on the team too, he was like 2 years younger than me, and that was always weird to like hear the guys talking about whatever, but it didn't really faze me because I'd been used to it, and I think it's one of the reasons why I don't get bothered by things that boys say.
Do you think that locker room talk has an impact on how you present yourself outside of the locker room and just how you interact with other people in society in general?
I think that there are certainly a lot of things that you talk about in the locker room with your teammates and your friends that maybe you wouldn't talk about to someone who's outside of that community, just because your locker room is a safe space.
Okay. And do you think that it's a positive or a negative impact?
I think it's a positive thing to have that place and have that sort of community of guys that you can pretty much turn to talk about anything, and you know that it's not going to leave the locker room. That's the general code, is that what's said in there stays in there.
Okay.
Most of the athletes that I played with are like different inside of the locker room. Like they're more just comfortable with whatever. Like they don't really care what they say or what they do because it's just their teammates and it's like a comfortable atmosphere. I definitely know that like some of the things that we talked about in the locker room we'd never really talk about outside of the locker room unless we were just like with our team, and it's kind of like an environment where it's like what happens like in a locker room, like the talk and stuff like stays in the locker room.